Good morning. Welcome to today's special back-to-school edition of City Watch, New York City's premier watchdog program for social, economic, political, and cultural issues here in New York City. My name is Edwina Francis Martin, and I'm joined this morning by Jeff Simmons, my co-host. Good morning, Jeff.
Good morning, Edwina.
So Wednesday was the first day back to school for the 2018-19 school year in New York City. New York City is the largest public school system in the world. More than 1.1 million students will be attending more than 1,700 public schools, and there are actually another 900 schools in addition to those public schools in the city. The New York City's Department of Education, which manages the system, has a budget of nearly $25 billion. So Jeff, when I was in school, my mother used to sing this little song as we went off in the morning, and we loved it. We used to hum along. It's like this song from the 1950s. School days, dear old golden rule days. Reading and writing and arithmetic taught to the tune of a hickory stick. And we didn't even know what a hickory stick was, so it just sounded funny to us. We were too young to realize just how awful that was.
I don't know what a hickory stick is.
It's a big, long stick that's really hard that was used for beating children.
Okay. Learning today.
Yep, I am happy to say that those hickory sticks are no longer legal or socially acceptable in New York City schools, although I've been reading some this week about how corporal punishment is alive and well, unfortunately, in other parts of the country. But what is going on in our schools today? What are the issues that our students, teachers, administrators are facing as this new school year begins? And our first guest is going to be introduced by Jeff.
So our first guest today is James Merriman, Chief Executive Officer of the New York City Charter School Center. This is an independent nonprofit that helps charter schools to get started, supports existing ones, and engages the charter school community around key issues. Mr. Merriman is one of the nation's foremost experts on charter school policy and a leading voice and advocate for high-quality, equitable charter schools, and he often speaks and writes about the actions that need to be taken to strengthen and expand charter schools within the New York City public school system. Welcome to the show, Mr. Merriman. First, can you give us an overview of what the Charter School Center does?
Sure, of course. First, thanks for having me, Jeff and Edwina. Glad to be here. The Charter Center was started about 15 years ago as a philanthropically supported effort to ensure that, as you said, we have a high-quality, equitable charter school system that increases good choices for parents. And so we do kind of two things. We provide key supports to charters, especially those getting started. It's a very complicated business, starting the school. And then, in addition, we disseminate research and we advocate at both the city and state level for a high-quality, growing charter sector. But can I just say one thing about the center, and I think the sector as a whole, which is it isn't about an ideology, and it isn't really about charter schools per se. It's about providing more seats that provide a high-quality education for kids in New York City.
How many charter schools are there in the city right now?
There are now, in the 18-19 school year, there are going to be 236 schools. And, of course, a lot of them, while this is back to school, last week was back to school week, a lot of them actually started in mid-August.
What's on the horizon this year in terms of the legislative year? What are you focusing on?
We are at a point now where there are only 28 charters that can be awarded in New York City to high-quality groups that want to start a good charter school. And it's called a cap, and this cap now needs to be raised because the fact is that we have more applicants now before the bodies that authorize charters, the SUNY Board of Trustees and the regents, than we have charters to give out. So eliminating or at least raising the cap in a serious way so that there's no artificial barrier to growth of a high-quality sector. That's what we are aiming at.
But what would happen if the cap were eliminated altogether? Because, it wasn't part of the reasoning for it in terms of having structured growth.
Right. So the honest answer is, other than continued thoughtful growth of only the schools that have a high chance of being successful, the answer is not much at all. Because, one, we have ensured in New York, as opposed to some other states, that getting a charter is a very, very difficult barrier to cross. Because we understand what the stakes are, and that parents shouldn't just have choice for choice's sake. We need to make sure that the choices that are being provided are high quality. So effectively, if we eliminated the cap tomorrow, what you'd continue to see is the same thoughtful growth over the next 20 years that you've seen over the last 20 years.
If that's the case, if it would be at the same pace, then how meaningful is it to have the cap eliminated?
Well, I think just as a matter of principle, why should you have a cap on the number of high-quality schools that could be providing good seats for kids who right now are not getting the kind of education that we expect for our own kids? But, I realize Albany is a town without pity, right? It's the town where dreams go to die. And if we can't get the cap eliminated, what we are looking for is a major raise in the cap. Because what we don't want is groups that are ready and willing and able to start a charter, but are looking down the road and saying, it's a 2 to 3 year process. It's hugely time intensive. It costs a lot of money, and we're not going to put in an application if we're not sure that if a charter won't be available. So that's what we're trying to avoid.
And currently, how many students are enrolled in charters? And if I'm correct, there's a waiting list at quite a number of the schools?
Yeah, so there will be about 123,000 students in charters this year. And when the lottery was held, because charters admit students through the lottery, when the lottery was held, there were 52,000 more applicants than there were available seats. 9 out of 10 charters have, almost double the number of applicants than they have seats. 97% of schools have wait lists. There's a lot of parent demand for charters, which of course is, and I think this is the most important thing in some ways, why we have charters in the first place. No one, of course, is required to send their child to a charter school. Every single child sitting in a charter school is there because they and their parents chose that school.
So you mentioned before about the process of starting a charter school. Is one of the biggest obstacles some of the resistance from public school supporters? What are the obstacles if I want to start a charter school in, say, Harlem? What are the obstacles I'm going to face along the way to be able to make that happen?
I think first and foremost, obstacle number one is going to be that you are going to have to find a building in which to put that school. Charters basically have two options. One is to seek co-location with a district in a district building, or to go out and build their own building. And in Harlem, both the cost of real estate and just the demand for space makes it very hard to start a school now in central Harlem. You mentioned political opposition, and there's no doubt that in some areas you would face that, while in other areas across the city you would be welcome with open arms.
I was going to say, yeah, and I know as far as, reading up on this, there's been resistance to a number of charters. Some say the existing cap allows for growth and innovation in the sector, but there's also questions about who gets enrolled, concerns about biases against enrolling disabled students, and I had recalled that the teachers union was opposed to allowing some charter schools to bypass teacher certification requirements. How do you counter some of those arguments?
Sure. On special education, the honest truth is that about 10 years ago there was a lot of truth to the fact that charters were not getting the job done with special education students. Fast forward 10 years with a lot of hard work by charter leaders who recognize this. We now serve almost a proportionate number of special education students compared to the district. And we're serving an ever wider variety of them, as well as creating schools that are specifically designed to serve kids. For instance, we'll have a second school open up that is exclusively for children who are on the spectrum. So that was a truth a long time ago. It is not true any longer. And the fact is that with both English language learners and special education students, when we enroll them, we're actually doing a better job of educating them. And that's one of actually the biggest programs we have at the center is a special education collaborative, which almost every charter school belongs to. And the purpose is to make sure that, it isn't just about enrolling kids and meeting the law. It's about giving those kids an equal opportunity with those in general education. So that's what I have to say about that issue.
And Jeff had also asked about teacher certification requirements. Right.
What happened was that there was a proposal that is now in litigation and not moving forward to allow charters to hire teachers who weren't traditionally certified. And ultimately, the objection to that is simply that all teachers should be certified. And that would be a great argument if you could provide any data that showed that certification resulted in more effective teachers. Unfortunately, the capstone of certification really is getting a master's in education. And study after study has shown there is no difference in effectiveness between teachers who have gotten that master's and teachers who haven't. But what the charter community had proposed was a very modest proposal that would allow high-quality schools to self-certify teachers to teach in those schools after going through a rigorous process of determining if they were able to run such a program. I'm disappointed that we couldn't go forward with that. It was an experiment. It was a pilot. Let's see if it works, because right now the present system of certification, what we do know for sure is it does not work. It does not ensure a high-quality teacher in every classroom.
So at the outset of this conversation, you had mentioned that, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that there's only room for 28 more charters right now in New York City. How many opened this year, and what are some of the new ones?
Sure. 13 opened this year, and that's about an average class of schools opening up, and it's an interesting mix. We have a school that's opening in Staten Island that will provide college credits as part of its high school. We have a not-for-profit called Urban Dove that runs one school for undercredited overage student that's starting a second school, so a kind of transfer high school. And those are just two of the schools that we have, along with the usual mix of elementary and middle schools that are simply trying to get kids the kind of education they haven't been able to get so far.
Well, as a Staten Islander, I've read a lot about the school, and people are pretty excited about it. So I'm wishing it the best of luck.
Yeah, Staten Island is one of those places where actually, what Jeff had said, would you meet resistance? You would generally not meet resistance in Staten Island, and the Bronx is another. So I think that school has a bright future.
So looking ahead to the upcoming legislative session, I'm curious who your allies on a state level would be in seeking an elimination of the cap or increasing the cap itself. Which legislators do you look to for support?
We have obviously looked to the governor for his leadership on this issue, and the governor has recognized that a vibrant, high-quality sector is something that he supports, and we'd look to him again and hope that we can convince him of the rightness of our cause. The fact is, we are a bipartisan issue. It was the only issue, and this is a long, long time ago in a galaxy far away, seemingly, that both McCain and Obama could agree on in a brighter period in our nation's history. But in Albany, we had support from Republican state senators, but there's also support from Democrats, and particularly legislators in the Bronx have been supportive of charters and quite publicly. So we will look to hopefully grow that support for our proposal.
Now, is this a change that would be as part of the budget, or is it a legislative change that is a separate bill?
That all depends, as you know, and you are well aware of the machinations that are Albany. As you know, the tendency is that things get put into the budget that are not necessarily directly budget related. I will just say that I personally am agnostic as to when it happens. I just would like it to happen.
And we've got about 2 minutes left. So can you just give us, Mr. Merriman, a recap of what the New York City Charter School Center does and how people can learn more about what you do?
Sure. The center provides supports for groups who are looking to start charters, as well as key operational supports for those who are now operating charter schools. And then we provide policy and advocacy at the city and state level to grow a high-quality, vibrant, and equitable charter sector. People who want to find out more about us and about charter schools can go to our website, which is www.nyccharterschools.org, and find out almost anything they need to know. And just, I'll say, as I said at the beginning, this is about providing a better quality education. And I was listening to the Parkland shooting survivor on this station right before I got on. And that level of ability to self-advocate and to fully participate in our civic and economic and social life, that's what we hope for every child. I know that's what the district hopes for, and we want to work in partnership with the district to make that vision a reality in New York City.
All right. Well, thank you once again for joining us today, and have a great weekend.
My pleasure. Thank you again for having me.